Not many people know that Craigslist once had a dating section. This might be one of the most foolish things I've ever done, and I've done some pretty foolish things in my life. I was freshly 23, just out of a bad relationship with someone I'd met online, and looking for someone new to date. At the time, many people were using Craigslist for casual one-night stands, but I didn't know that. I thought it was just another dating website. So I posted an ad for a relationship, but it was actually me who started a conversation with someone. My ad never got any responses. I met a guy who responded to me immediately, and we exchanged phone numbers. He lived in my area, so I wouldn't have to travel far to meet him. Things moved quickly, but he was very attentive. I thought if it was meant to be, the speed didn't matter. We met at a nice restaurant. He was older, already in his 40s, but I didn't let that bother me. Our first night out was great. He had lots of money and made sure I knew it. Looking back, that was a red flag I ignored. I can already hear you thinking it, but yes, I know now. After our first date, I was all in for a relationship, and so was he. We went out about once a week due to our different schedules, but in my mind, we were already dating. Time passed, and I enjoyed my boyfriend who really seemed to get me. He said all the right things at the right times, making me feel he was the only one for me. Each time we met, we grew closer. We even visited each other's houses for small dates, though my parents hated that I was dating someone twice my age. They never tried to stop me, though. After a while, I got curious about how he spent his time when we weren't together. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I wanted to know more about him. The mystery had wooed me, but now I needed clarity. I'm glad I found out, but I didn't like what I discovered. He claimed he owned a business downtown selling sandwiches. I visited a few times to see him, but he was never there. I told an employee I was dating the owner, and he thought I was gay because the owner was a woman. That was the only shop fitting his description. I thought I had the wrong place, so I asked him on our next date to show me his store. He took me to that same sandwich shop owned by a woman. So he was a liar. If he lied about this, what else was he lying about? I found out when I trailed him for a day. I know I became a stalker trying to find the truth. Don't make excuses for me, I was wrong too. I saw him with another woman in the next town over. I confronted him, asking who she was. He said she was his sister. She immediately corrected him, saying she was his girlfriend. We both got angry, and he admitted he was collecting dates. We were just trophies to him, part of an experiment to see how many women he could date at once. He wasn't remorseful at all. He told us there were around 10 women he was dating. He promised to tell them and end it, but I doubt he did. After we left, we vented in the parking lot, but ultimately went our separate ways. I went to get my friend to go to a bar. On the way, I drove through a green light when suddenly we were on the side of the road crawling out of the car. My head hurt from hitting the window. The car that hit us took off. I called the cops, who asked many questions. The ambulance and fire trucks came, but we were fine. My car was totaled and undrivable. I only remembered being hit, but traffic cameras caught the incident. The cops found out it was the Craigslist guy who hit us and fled. I believe he did it on purpose, but since it couldn't be proven, he was only charged with leaving the scene of an accident. Craigslist personals were taken down shortly after due to trafficking concerns. I'm glad because you don't want to use Craigslist for anything. A few years later, I found someone else through another dating app. It worked out, and we've been together for a long time. We even got married. I'm not advocating for online dating, but sometimes good things can come out of it. I once dated a guy from a website you might have heard of, but not for this reason. Craigslist used to have a section for finding people to sleep with for a night, and that's what I was looking for. Yes, I was a fellow degenerate not looking for a relationship. I met a guy named Ben. He was around my age. We got together for a night, never expecting to see each other again, but he made numerous attempts to impress me. I never thought this could happen, but he turned out to be a cool person and tried to get me to go to dinner afterwards. I didn't want to be rude, so I agreed. I ended up having a great time with him. We saw each other several more times for the same thing an evening at a hotel followed by a restaurant. We started hanging out more, and eventually he asked if I enjoyed my time with him. I told him honestly that it had been fun and I wished it wouldn't end. We ended up dating, which isn't the best love story, but it's more realistic. I hated my home life, so any way out was fine with me. Ben had a house all to himself and invited me to move in right away if I wanted to. I did. I moved out of my parents' house and into his. If you're wondering, yes, this was a huge mistake that I regret to this day. I can't take it back, but I've learned from it. This was my last internet date. Don't worry, I'm still alive. When I moved in, Ben changed completely. It started with small things like telling me not to touch certain items in the house, but escalated to not letting me do anything at all. He was very possessive. At first, I didn't mind because I was new in the house and respected that he had built a life there. He began setting rules for me, like informing him when I left or came home. I was okay with that because he was paranoid about intruders, but he went overboard. He told me he didn't have any enemies, and I thought he was being excessive, but I respected it. In the end, he just wanted to control everything. It wasn't about safety. He never had anyone over either. Most days, I'd sit in the living room watching TV or playing on a crappy computer that wasn't mine. He'd stay in the back room doing whatever he did and didn't want to be disturbed. I found that unattractive, but I couldn't leave either. If I disturbed him to say I was leaving, he'd get mad and yell that I was ruining his work. If I left without telling him, he'd call me nonstop until I answered and would lock me out if I got back too late. The cool guy I fell in love with seemed more like an angry dad than a boyfriend. I never wanted to live this way, but I didn't think about leaving just yet. It was either live there basically alone, never leaving, or go back to my awful, abusive parents. This was the best alternative for me at the time. One day I wanted to go out with a friend to her party. I didn't tell Ben because he didn't want to be disturbed, and I was gone all day and most of the night. He wasn't spending time with me anyway, so what was the problem? Well, when I came back, he had a problem. He told me I shouldn't come in that late and started to beat on me. After his fit, he expected me to lay down in the same bed with him and sleep soundly like nothing happened. I went from being in love with him to being absolutely afraid of him. I wanted to leave and go anywhere else. That morning when he locked himself in his back room, I did. I took my small amount of stuff and went back to my parents' house. They didn't let me back in. My dad was glad I left and made me feel like I was the reason he was so abusive. My mom was no different. So I became homeless at that moment. I called a nearby friend and had her come get me so I could move in with her. She was angry that I waited so long to move into a safe place, but she still let me in. Once I moved in with her, Ben came looking for me. He told me to get in the car and go back home with him, or he would burn the house down. We called the police because my friend had filmed him yelling that at me from his car. The video quality was bad, but the audio was clear. Ben never came back after that. We gave the evidence to the cops, but I think they didn't take it seriously. Ben made a threat and didn't follow through, so the cops probably just ignored it. I never saw Ben again and hopefully never will. It's been a long time, and I've almost forgotten what he even looks like. Maybe that's for the best. I found a new boyfriend later, and we're still dating, but I don't plan to move in with him anytime soon. Trust me, I've learned my lesson. The last thing I want is another controlling person telling me when to breathe. I might be overthinking, but something happened today that I want to share and get your thoughts on. A friend sent me a Craigslist ad for some dolls with many extras for only $50. It seemed like a great deal considering all the items included. I emailed the seller but didn't get a reply. I figured someone else might have gotten it before me. Then I received an email saying, "Sorry, I've been out all day today. Where can you pick it up?" The message was sent from an iPhone. I replied, "I can pick it up tomorrow. What time and where do you want to meet?" I didn't get a response, so I went to bed. The next morning I got an email from the seller saying, "I waited at the chapel school for about 10 minutes. You weren't there, so I'm leaving." I replied, "I'm really sorry, I didn't get any emails last night before bed. I just woke up and didn't know we had an appointment. I can come to your home if that's okay." "It's only a 30-minute drive for me," she replied. "No, it's fine. Can we meet at the school in an hour?" I checked on Google and found there are 2 chapel schools in the town. I sent another email asking which one it was. There was complete silence. Since I had already missed one meeting with her, I decided to go. I quickly got into my car, sent another email saying which school I chose, and that I was on my way. It was the weekend, so the school would be closed, and no one would be around. I didn't receive an email telling me which school it was, so I hoped I picked the right one. After about 5 minutes, a black SUV pulled up next to me. There was a nice couple in their late 30s inside and 2 big dogs in the back seat. The woman got out holding a big closed box. She said I could look through it before giving her the money. We were standing at the front of her SUV. Then I saw the man get out of the car and walk to the back. I thought he was checking on the dogs, but he walked around the back of the car and came up behind me in my blind spot. I turned to look at him, surprised because it seemed odd. He had a half smile on his face and wouldn't look me in the eye. It made me nervous, and I got a sinking feeling in my stomach. I realized there was no one else around, and there was no reason for him to come up behind me like that. I put the box in my car, keeping an eye on the man, and hurried away. If he just wanted to keep his wife safe, why didn't he get out of the car before we exchanged money? And why did he go the long way around the car to come up behind me when the shortest way to his wife was in the front where we were standing? Why bring two big dogs in an SUV for a short ride? I think the dogs were meant to distract me, but I'm not sure. Maybe they changed their minds when they realized I wouldn't be an easy target. It was really weird. I'm not someone who thinks everything is dangerous, but there was definitely something disturbing about the whole situation. Luckily, I got away safely, but I can't help wondering what they were really up to. I bought a new Apple Watch, but didn't use it much, so I decided to sell it on Craigslist. I took photos of the front, back, and each band, then posted the ad. I got a bunch of responses right away. I decided to answer them one by one, giving priority to the first person who contacted me. One of the responses was from a man in the military. He explained that he wanted to buy the watch as a graduation gift for his cousin who was finishing school. His reason for getting the watch was nice, so I decided to sell it to him. He then explained that his cousin's graduation party was happening that weekend, and he wanted the watch to arrive on time. He asked if I could send it the next day, promising to send extra money to cover the faster shipping. I agreed because it sounded like a good idea. After our conversation, I received a PayPal receipt from him. I took the watch to the post office and sent it off. After I sent the package and shared the tracking number with him, something felt strange. I realized I didn't get any email from my bank about the money transfer. When I looked at the PayPal receipt again, I noticed some things that seemed off. The payment confirmation had some unusual details. Usually when I sold stuff on Craigslist, I checked the sender's address to make sure it was real. But this time, the person sent the payment through PayPal, and unfortunately I didn't double check it. I was in a hurry and believed the story about the urgent need for the watch. The address on the PayPal receipt was sketchy, not like a normal PayPal address. As I paid more attention, I noticed other things that didn't add up. The whole receipt seemed off, and not like a valid PayPal one. I felt like a fool because I'm usually the one telling people to be cautious about these things. I was just trying to help, but I ended up falling for a scam. I went to the local police station to share what happened. They said since I lived in an unincorporated area, I needed to talk to the sheriff's office. The folks at the sheriff's office were helpful. They sent someone to meet me at my local police station, and we had a good talk about the situation. I shared all the details, the ad, the response, the man in the military, and the rush for next day shipping. The deputy explained that without the serial number, there wasn't much they could do. It was disappointing, but he assured me he would write a report. Then I remembered I took pictures of everything. Even though I fell for the scam, I had a photo of the back of the watch, including the serial number. So I might have been foolish, but at least I was a smart fool. The deputy wrote down the serial number and the address where I sent the watch. He told me he would talk to the local police and see if they could figure things out. I shared the story with my boyfriend, friends, and parents. 2 days later, the deputy called and said they got a warrant for the house where I sent the watch. They searched the house and found not just one watch, but thousands of them. These folks had watches worth thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. There was a woman who allowed the items to be sent there. It turned out she was receiving these things for her fiancé. She said those things were gifts and that her fiancé is a good and honest man. The police tried to explain to her that he might not be telling the truth, that he's stealing things. The deputy mentioned that because I reported it in the suburbs of Chicago, people from all over the country might get their valuable items back. A few days later, they called and said my watch was ready. I had to go to this intimidating jail building to get it. I went through a scanner, got checked for weapons, and talked on the phone to explain why I was there. A lady guided me to a room with lockers and handed me an envelope with the package. I was surprised to see that everything was still wrapped in the tissue, just like how I packed them. Now, I make sure to wear my watch every day, and I've decided to stay away from using Craigslist. My friend teaches piano to many people. She used to put ads on Craigslist to find students, explaining the cost for lessons, though I don't remember the exact amount. Anyone could sign up for lessons, whether they wanted to learn alone or in a group. My friend teaches people with different skill levels, helping them with exams, music theory, and practical skills. She's really good at playing the piano and still plays almost every day. She has 3 keyboards and a grand piano, which was super expensive, around $40,000. One day she put an ad on Craigslist offering to teach piano for money. At the time, teaching piano was her main job and how she made her living. After about a week, she got a few replies. 2 were from women, and 1 was from a man. She chose to teach the man first and planned to reschedule the women for later in the week. The man was supposed to come over in the evening around 4 or 5 p.m., right after he finished work. My friend told me that when he walked up to her house, he seemed really weird. He was difficult to describe because when I asked her, she couldn't say much about him. The only thing she kept talking about was the feeling she got from him. The feelings were so bad that she felt sick and nervous about letting him into her house for the lesson. But since the guy was there with the money, paying her before the lesson, she went along with it. Even though she could have said no right there at the door, she felt like she needed a good excuse to turn him away. So despite feeling uneasy, she chose to let him in, going against her gut feeling. They went ahead with the piano lesson, which lasted about 40 minutes. He took a seat at the grand piano, and believe it or not, she started the lesson on that expensive $40,000 grand piano. I always told her not to do that, as I thought it would be better for her students to begin on the keyboards, considering the cost and all. But to be professional, she thought it was okay. She took out her music books, theory notes, and chords to start the lesson. I don't know much about what pianists do, but she taught the lesson. When it ended, the guy was still acting strange. She mentioned he wasn't a great learner and had trouble playing even simple scales. His fingers were big and clumsy for playing the piano, so he often missed some keys or pressed 2 at the same time. But her job was to teach him, so she did her best. After the lesson, she suggested scheduling regular lessons, like every week, to help him get better at playing the piano. Everyone knows the top musicians practice a lot throughout their lives. The saying "practice makes perfect" is really true in that world. So my friend recommended having a lesson once a week to improve his piano skills. The guy looked at her and said, "No, I'm fine. Thanks for the lesson," though. As he was getting ready to leave, he suddenly stopped at the door and started staring at my friend, checking her out from head to toe like he was thinking about doing something really bad. "Is everything okay?" she asked. She even asked, "Do you need to use the bathroom?" The guy stared at her blankly for another 3 seconds. Then, as if he suddenly snapped back to reality, he said, "No, I'm okay. Thanks. Thanks for the lesson." After that, he walked out the door and left. She closed the door and told me she felt really uneasy. To make a long story short, after many weeks passed, it turned out that the guy she taught piano to during that 40-minute lesson was Philip Markoff. He was known as the Craigslist killer, convicted of murdering women he met through Craigslist. We couldn't believe what had just happened. Somehow he had decided not to take action on my friend in that moment at the doorway when he looked her up and down. It must have been the split second when he decided if he wanted to hurt her or not. Even now, when I talk to my friend, we still wonder what made him decide she could live while others couldn't. She was alone at home, and he could have easily done something bad. For a while, she stopped taking on new clients for piano lessons and only taught her regular students. Before I begin, let me introduce myself. My name is Matt, and I'm a 17-year-old student. I enjoy hanging out with my friends, and that's where it all started. Over the months, I had been taking a bus to my friend's village, where we would smoke, relax, and chat about basic stuff. While we were chilling out, we noticed an old guy. He approached us in a weird way, like someone who had drunk too much. Then he asked, "Hey, can you tell me the name of this place?" We told him, and then he just smiled and walked away. We laughed about it, but I wish we hadn't. What he said next made a shiver run down my spine. He looked at us with a serious face and said, "What are you laughing at?" We stopped laughing immediately and just stared at him. He added, "You better get out of here, or I will hurt each one of you, especially the fat one." This made me really angry, so I started yelling back at him, saying, "Why are you calling me fat?" My friends tried to calm me down, but we ended up shouting at each other for a whole minute. It all stopped when he growled and quietly mumbled to himself. We thought it was over, and he was probably just very drunk, so we didn't pay much attention to it for the rest of the day. I kept seeing him around, but he didn't say anything, just stared straight into my eyes. A few weeks passed, and I almost forgot about it, to be honest. When I came back in the middle of June, everything seemed okay, or at least that's what I thought. We had a party at Mike's house, and it was me, John, Veronica, Kate, and Ellie. Ellie even teased me a bit. In short, everything was awesome. After a while, Kate came and told us she heard something outside. We ignored her, saying she might be worried for no reason, and that maybe her mind was playing tricks on her. But we were all wrong. Then, after about an hour and a half, Kate came to us again and said, "It's not in my head. There's really someone outside." The girls got really scared. My buddies and I were a bit worried but not scared. Since it was a village and not a city, we thought there wouldn't be any burglars. Again, we were wrong. After maybe 4 to 7 minutes, we heard loud banging at the door. Mike told me to take the girls to his room upstairs, and I did what he said. After that, I went back downstairs, but all the lights were off, and all 3 of them were crouching down, looking like they were trying to hide from someone or something. "What's going on down here?" I asked. "Don't come down here." "Mike saw someone with a shotgun outside," they replied. I felt like we were all in danger. The first thing I thought about was what kind of shotgun it was. So I asked, what kind of shotgun did he have? The one you pump or the one with 2 barrels, Mike said. I think he has the one with 2 barrels. I sat there thinking and said, he only has 2 shots. Mike asked, what? So I explained, he only has 2 chances to hit something. If he comes in the house, we need to be really quick to disarm him. Paul and John thought I was crazy, but Mike told them to be quiet and that I was right. After that, I went into Mike's room and told the girls to call the police. I explained about the guy outside with a shotgun and told them to be careful. Both of them started crying and almost lost control. I repeated to Kate to call the police, and she did. After the call, I heard loud screaming and gunshots from where my friends were. I hurried down and saw Mike bleeding from his shoulder. He shouted loudly for us to call the police. I told him Kate had already called them. When I looked to my right, I saw Paul and John holding down a middle-aged guy who was yelling he was going to kill us. John grabbed his shotgun and hit the guy in the head so hard that he fell unconscious. When the police arrived, we explained everything. Mike went to the hospital and was okay after a few days. The police said he was a 42-year-old homeless man from Romania. We had no idea how or why he ended up at Mike's place, and we didn't know his true intentions. You might think the story ends here, but it doesn't. It's over for my friends, but not for me. One day in September, we thought it would be okay to hang out and chat. Mike brought up that night. He said things like, if I didn't get hurt, I might have fought him. That guy broke my door. We teased him, and he started coughing. After he stopped, he asked me, you wanted to be with Ellie that night, right? I chuckled and said jokingly, well, if she was interested, we laughed again. It was now around 9 p.m., so we decided to head home. Since it was the weekend and the bus wasn't running, I had to walk home, which was about 6 miles away. We all said bye to each other, and my long walk started. I put on my headphones and listened to some music. While enjoying the music, I felt someone touch my shoulder. I took out my headphones and turned around. The only person I didn't want to see was standing a few feet from me. It was the old drunk guy. He screamed at me, my friend is in prison because of you. It was the only thing he had to do, and he messed it up. I'm going to hurt you all by myself. I punched him in his nose and started running. I'm a big guy, 240 pounds and 6 feet tall, but I ran so fast that I tripped over my own foot and fell right on my face. I tried to get up, but the guy jumped on me and started hitting me in the head. I hit him with the back of my head on his nose, and luckily it worked. I got up and ran away, screaming for help as loud as I could. About 4 people came outside to see what was going on. When they saw me, they yelled at him to leave me alone and even started running towards us. They called the police and an ambulance. I explained everything to them. The next day, while I was in the hospital with my parents, a lot of people came to visit me. Everything is normal now. I go out more, and I'm even dating Ellie. Sometimes I still hang out with my friends. This experience was really bad, but at least I lost more than 25 pounds and got a new girlfriend. After my summer agreement ended, I started searching for a very affordable apartment near my school. During my search, I repeatedly came across a Craigslist ad posted by 3 college students who were vegans and looking for a roommate. Although I'm not vegan, I believed I could be respectful and easily get along with them. The ad included pictures of the girls and they seemed friendly, so I called the number. A man picked up and said I could visit to check out the place. He mentioned that my potential roommates were students at the same community college I attended, and even told me about the subjects they were studying. It sounded real, but just to be safe, I brought a friend with me when I went to see the place. When we reached the house, he showed me the smallest room, which I liked. The rent was affordable, and as a broke student, it was perfect for me. Then he showed me the other rooms, which were totally empty. No one was living there. He said, "Oh yeah, those are for the other 2 roommates. They're not here yet. They're still moving in," but I didn't really believe him. Despite my doubts, I knew I couldn't find a room at such a low price anywhere else, so I agreed to take the room, moved in with my sleeping bag, and stayed cautious, hoping everything would turn out fine. Oh boy, I was a dumb kid. I soon realized that this man was my only roommate, and he slept in the bedroom next to mine. I felt something was really wrong, but I was stuck without better options. I had recently taken a job at a coffee shop, and it barely paid anything, so I knew I couldn't afford to move to a different place at that time. About a week into our rental agreement, the man asked me to join him in the living room for a chat. He said it was to help us get to know each other better. At first, he started with some casual conversation, but then he brought up things he'd seen in adult movies. Yeah, you get me. He was talking about how he doesn't get why some people like that stuff. I sort of understood where this was heading, and things got really uncomfortable fast. I found myself sitting in his living room, and he had this creepy smirk on his face. Things hit the lowest point when it got serious. He told me to imagine we were super good friends, like really close, and he said this with a creepy grin, looking at me weirdly. As he continued, he made more inappropriate comments, making the situation worse. It felt like I was in a really bad place, and I knew I had to get out. I stood up and said, "Okay, I can't stay here anymore. I'm moving out now. Thank you." I took what I could carry and called a friend to pick me up right away. The guy was really angry, following me around the apartment as I tried to get my things. Then he started insisting I owed him a month's rent, which I didn't. But my parents always told me not to deal with crazy stuff, so I found the money and paid him just to get out of there. For the next 3 months, I slept on my friend's floor, but only when his roommate wasn't there, as he didn't like people staying for free, which I thought was understandable. Sometimes I also slept on the couch at work. I even used the restroom at a nearby 24-hour grocery store to sleep, where nobody bothered me. Life was hard, but I preferred doing all that instead of staying with that strange guy. He was just weird. I finally found a room I could afford, and it was with a female musician. These kinds of situations are not uncommon in places like LA, but I really hope he didn't take advantage of other people like he did with me. What seemed like a simple Craigslist deal for a cheap dining table quickly turned into a nerve-wracking encounter I'll never forget. Let me share with you what happened to me. I use sites like Craigslist for the same reasons as everyone else. You can find expensive items at really discounted prices or cheap things for even less. I don't have much money, so these sites are essential for getting things like furniture, which are usually very expensive elsewhere. This incident occurred when I was looking for a dining room table. Ours was really old, and my family used it for eating and working, so it had seen better days. I searched on Facebook Marketplace and OfferUp but found nothing good. Most of the tables were still expensive, and the sellers wouldn't negotiate. So I turned to Craigslist. Around here, most people use other sites, but Craigslist still had the cheapest deals, even though they were rare. As soon as I opened the site and searched, a great listing appeared. It was a basic wooden dining table listed for only $100. Compared to the $400 to $500 others were asking, this was a steal. I messaged the seller saying I'd love to check it out and would pay the full price. He didn't reply immediately, so I hung out with my kids until around 7 when they went to get ready for bed. I checked my laptop and saw a response from a few minutes earlier. The seller apologized and said the table was going to be thrown out tomorrow morning, but if I really wanted it, I'd have to come by tonight or any time before 5 a.m. It was odd that he'd sell it at any time during the night, and his reasoning didn't make much sense. But after some thought, I replied saying I could pick it up right away. I didn't want to go very late or super early, but it was only 7, so it seemed fine. The man quickly replied, agreeing and sending the address. It was only 10 minutes away, so I told my wife where I'd be and headed out. You probably know I don't live in a fancy area. When I say the seller's house was really worn down, I mean it. It was small like the others around here, but the yard was full of trash and random items, surrounded by a thin chain link fence. I parked on the side, opened the fence, walked through the yard, and up to the already open door. I could hear people talking and laughing inside. I peeked in and lightly knocked on the door. Immediately, a man came around the corner and invited me in. He looked like he was in his mid-20s, probably late college. As I stepped inside, I couldn't help but notice how disgusting the place was. There were beer cans lying around and stains on the carpet. It looked like a house that hosted hundreds of college parties. The man was very laid back, casually walking me down the hallway into the kitchen while talking about how he didn't have room for the table anymore. In the kitchen, there were 2 other men around the same age, standing against the wall in the middle of a conversation. Next to them was the table. Somehow it looked almost untouched, which was surprising given the state of the house. I walked around it to check its stability. Suddenly, the house went silent. The 2 talking stopped, and the man selling the table didn't speak either. I looked up to see them all staring at me. Did I do something? I asked, looking at each of them. When my eyes fell on one of the men closest to me, I noticed his pupils were massive, like he was on drugs. I didn't know what he was on, but I knew this wasn't right. Not only was it strange, but I didn't want to buy a table from these people. I think I'm going to pass on it. Thank you, though, I said softly. I started walking toward the hallway, but one of them stepped in front of me, blocking my way. He didn't say anything, just stood there. Something about the way they were acting made me realize this was planned. They likely never meant to sell the table. Fear washed over me as I stood there, surrounded by strangers. Then, one of them whispered something in the other's ear, and they moved aside without a word. I cautiously walked between them, hurried down the hallway, and out the door. A lot went through my head on the drive home. I knew they were planning something terrible, but what and why they let me go, I don't know. When I got home, I told my wife, who convinced me to call the police. They couldn't do anything without something actually happening. Whatever those men were planning, I hope no one else has to find out. Selling shoes on Craigslist seemed harmless until I found myself at the mercy of a violent stranger. Let me tell you about a scary experience I had selling my shoes on Craigslist a year ago. I was trying to save up some extra cash to move out of my old apartment and hope to use the money to pay for movers. The shoes weren't anything special, but I listed them at generous prices to sell them quickly. However, Craigslist wasn't the best place for shoes, and it took a whole week before I got an offer. This guy with an email named John K. offered just $5 less than my listing price. It seemed unnecessary to adjust the price, but I didn't want to wait longer, so I agreed. We arranged to meet the next day at 5 in the parking lot of a public gas station in the middle of town. The next day I texted him, and he confirmed he was on his way, so I left and arrived at the gas station right at 5. John wasn't there yet, but there was a lot of traffic, so I figured he'd be late. I sat in my car patiently. Over the next 30 minutes, the roads cleared, and the sun started setting. Finally, John pulled in. He drove a small sedan with no working headlights, looking like it came from a scrapyard. He parked next to me and got out. John looked like he was in his 30s, a large guy with ripped clothes and long unkempt hair. He didn't say much, so I brought out the shoes and let him look at them. As he held the shoes, he kept looking back at the gas station. I didn't know what he was looking at, but after he checked over his shoulder multiple times, I glanced over too. The gas station was empty except for one guy pumping gas. I had no idea what John was looking at. John was taking his time, pointlessly examining the shoes multiple times as if they were some rare collectibles. But they were just regular sneakers, nothing special. Then John looked over his shoulder again, just as the car by the pump started to drive away. Suddenly, his whole demeanor changed. He stopped looking at the shoes and stared at me. "What else do you have?" he asked. I looked at him, confused. "Those are the only shoes I brought. I didn't know you were interested in others." His eyes went cold. He stepped past me and put his hand on my car door, trying to open it. It was locked. John immediately looked at me and told me to unlock it, his voice deep and threatening. I stared at him, trying to figure out what to do. There was no time to think. I unlocked the door, thinking he might just take a couple of random bills I had in the front. But then he said something unexpected. "Get in." He opened the passenger door and repeated, "Get in." I stood there, even more worried about where this was going. I looked around, hoping someone else was there, but the gas station was empty. No people or cars in sight. John grabbed my arm and pulled me to the door, taking my keys and shoving me into the car. He threw a few punches, landing on the right side of my face. I tried to get up, but John slammed the door against my head, making my vision blurry and everything fading in and out. I heard him start walking around the car, as if going to the driver's side. Then he suddenly turned around and sprinted back to his car. I was still out of it and barely remember what happened next. But I guess someone pulled in at the perfect time and confronted John, scaring him away. If they hadn't arrived, and John managed to drive away with me, I don't know what would have happened. Assuming his car was either stolen or untraceable to his name, then stealing my car and abducting me would have left no trace of our interaction. He would have had days, if not weeks, to do whatever he planned before anyone would even start looking for me. When a Craigslist buyer came to look at my lounge chairs, it quickly became clear he wasn't the only visitor I'd have that night. It was around this time last year when I decided to use Craigslist to sell a few things I needed to get rid of. My house was getting cluttered, and I planned to get some new furniture. With winter approaching, I wanted to get these items out quickly. The main pieces I was selling were 2 lounge chairs from my living room. They were big and a bit outdated, but still fully functional without any stains or rips. In about half a day, a few responses came in. 2 out of 3 gave me lowball offers, so there was only one serious buyer. He wanted to look at the chairs after work that day, around 6 or 6:30. I agreed, happy to get rid of them quickly. Usually I prefer meeting in public, but I had no way to transport the chairs, and even if I did, I couldn't lift them myself, so I sent him my address. By 6:00, I turned on the front porch light, opened the curtains, and sat in the living room, waiting for him. About 20 minutes later, a truck pulled into my driveway. The buyer took a few minutes before getting out and walking up to the door. I greeted him and let him in. He was an average-looking man, late 20s or early 30s, wearing typical work clothes. His name was Matt, and he started some small talk, explaining why he was excited about the chairs. He seemed nice, and I felt relieved that this would be quick and easy. Matt walked around the chair, sat in it, and seemed to enjoy it. We talked about the price, and he agreed to pay what I had listed. But just as we were about to exchange cash, we both heard a car door slam shut. It sounded like it came from the driveway where he parked his truck. Matt quickly went outside to check. I watched, unsure of what was happening. Through the window, I saw no other cars, so someone must have been messing with his truck. A minute later, Matt came back in, clearly angry. He said someone had stolen stuff from his car and seemed to distrust me, thinking I was involved. I assured him I wasn't, but I understood his skepticism, and I was also wary of him. Before we could work anything out, we heard footsteps approaching the front door. We turned to see a guy in a hoodie pushing the door open and stepping inside. The guy's eyes were bloodshot, and he looked deranged. His right hand was in his pocket, holding a very recognizable object. He stood just a few feet away, looking furious. He was young, maybe 18 or 19, but still dangerous. Matt and I stood still, trying not to provoke him. Matt tried to calm the kid, holding his hands up and taking a step closer. But the kid quickly pulled out the weapon and aimed it at Matt. It could have been fake, but we had no way to tell, and the kid's behavior made it seem real. The kid yelled at Matt to walk out the door. In shock, Matt complied. The kid followed him out, holding him at gunpoint all the way to the truck, where he made Matt get in the driver's seat and then got in the back. I watched in terror as they drove away, obviously against Matt's will. As soon as they were gone, I called 911 and then ran to my car to follow them, describing the situation to the operator. But they were gone. I couldn't find any sign of them. The police ran an investigation using the information I provided, quickly identifying who Matt was and his truck's license plate. For the next couple of days, I waited for a call, but it never came. Both Matt and his truck never turned up. I felt guilty, thinking I should have done more, but everything was so risky. I likely could have lost my life too. Even in those final moments, I didn't know if Matt was in on it as part of some elaborate plan. I don't know what that kid wanted or why any of it happened. It's been almost a year, and I don't think we'll ever know more.